I call Dr. David Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In rising to speak to Part 3 of the Act, acknowledge it is the substantive part where all those changes are made, and join my colleague Grant Robertson in challenging government ministers to speak on this bill. I too find it odd that there wasn't great competition for calls to speak about these changes. This is a very important Act we are amending. It is the Act that provides us with the resources as a country to afford the assets that we hold in common: the hospitals, the schools, the roads and the courthouses. And without a robust tax system that promotes enterprise, that ensures people pay their fair share of tax from the profits of those enterprises towards the common good, we as a country will not go forward. We will not grow, and we will not maintain the level of services that we have come to expect as a country, and the growing level of services we will look forward to in the future. For example, in the health sector, where the cost of healthcare goes up and up every year due to new technologies that enable better quality of life in old age, we on this side of the House want a robust tax system that can support those standards of living that we all want. And the government has acknowledged that they have not funded the health system to meet the inflationary pressures, and the $1.7 billion estimate that Infometrics have put on the underfunding of the health system has a very real consequence for New Zealanders. So I would challenge those members opposite to get up and say why it is that they want to make these changes, and why they don't want to make it more robust still, why they don't want to promote enterprise more, why they don't want to have R&D tax credits in here in a way that is readily available to all businesses, so that we can actually grow the economy. The current situation where we pick winners and have in this piece of legislation, this part of the Act, clauses that promote a very narrow type of research and development that may benefit the minister when he wants photo ops, but doesn't actually benefit the country in the way that it should, is something that needs to be debated. The members opposite, the government members, should justify why it is that we have these narrow R&D provisions in the law and not much broader ones. And I expect the minister and the chair will have some thoughts on that. I look forward to the minister speaking a little bit about the vision for R&D that she has, that we all should buy into, because at the moment it's not obvious why it should be so narrow, and this is a very important part of the bill. But Mr. Chair, I want to speak about some very specific points in this contribution, and the first of those is the exception for overseas accommodation, and the second is the exception around accommodation provided to ministers of religion. And I think both of these things are worthy and should be supported for different reasons, for very different reasons. The overseas accommodation exemptions aim to include in calculations at a reasonable level the benefit derived from allowances or payments. And this is, I refer members to 69B on page 41 of the bill. These changes are an attempt to ensure that that overseas accommodation is supported. So when enterprises are moving out overseas and expanding their businesses, they will have the necessary support to do that in a manner that ensures that they can go about their business in a reasonable way without being carved out a great big payment exemption or luxuries that would stop us getting our fair share of tax from companies, but that actually promote enterprise. And I think this is one of the basic principles of tax policy, is to ensure that it's fair, but also that it promotes economic development in a way that certainly I care about and members on this side of the House care about. And of course we know that Labor governments have historically had much higher growth rates than national-led governments. Since World War II, national-led governments have grown the economy on average by 2.9%, not bad in itself, but Labor governments have grown it by 3.7%. And so we need provisions like this in the law that ensure that enterprise is promoted. The second area I want to speak specifically about is the exception for accommodation provided to ministers of religion. And this has been a little bit contentious. I think though, that the contentious aspects of this, Mr. Chair,
Dr. David Clark.
the contentious aspects of this seem to have gone away in the way that it has been resolved in the clause that we have here in the bill. Part of the reason, and we've actually amended the laws around this in the last, if memory serves me correctly, in the last annual rates remedial matters bill that went through for the 2014-2015 year, in order to ensure that remuneration for accommodation was not calculated in the tax, and the Minister will correct me if I'm wrong, I hope, or members opposite might rise to their feet and take a call. The attempt was being made to ensure that the remuneration given to ministers for their accommodation, recognising that they are sent places, that it's a calling, that it's not necessarily a benefit of a luxury nature, not be counted in their salary. Effectively, it is, at one level you could say it's a kind of perk, and at another level it's an attempt by the state to support the work that traditional ministers of religions do in small communities around the country. In many small communities, particularly those struggling to get new enterprises off the ground, those that were once thriving communities and industries that have struggled in recent years, we could lay some blame at the foot of the government for its lack of regional development policies, but let's talk about the principle here. Those communities often have, as the last remaining professional member in them, a minister of religion. Somebody who has a level of education and has been trained in critical thinking in a way that enables them to act in those communities as counsellors or as peacemakers. Often they're the people who will sign official documentation because there is no other professional person in town to witness documents. Simple, everyday matters. They, of course, bury people and they marry people and so on, but they also the hatch, match and dispatch I've heard people talk of in those regional communities. That is part of the role of those ministers of religion. But recognising that they are those people that do those duties in those towns and that they actually provide a valuable service, and that the state wants in some way to recognise that through trying to ensure that the tax system doesn't overly penalise them for that accommodation that they have, was the intention of the changes last year. And the amendments here, I assume, having not been a part of that particular debate on the committee, are aimed at ensuring that the principle that sat behind that amendment we made last year is affected in this law. And I refer members to number 70, 3B, where it says, for the purposes of subsection 3A, the calculation of the amount of the item remuneration excludes the value of accommodation described in subsection 1 that is provided to the person. And so that, to me, as I read it, is a clarifying statement to make that absolutely clear. And we can only assume that there have been some disputes as a result of the Remedial Matters Bill last year, and that therefore officials have come back in order to make that abundantly clear. And I hope my memory of that is correct. I see many officials there who will be available to brief government members should they have questions, or the Minister and the Chair if she's not clear on the issue. I think it would be good to clarify for the House whether this is designed as a clarifying aspect or indeed it does in some way alter the purpose that I have not captured, because I'm interested to hear that. I think it is a principle that this House should understand. So I expect the Minister and the Chair may wish to address that, certainly if I've misunderstood. The other matter I wish to address in this contribution, sorry, I'll just find my page here, was around the R&D tax credits. A specific paragraph which I've taken my finger out of the page. I've got so wound up in my my exposition around overseas accommodation and foreign and ministers of religion's exemption for property that I have lost that. I might wait for that contribution to be made in another section of the bill, sir, because I have lost my page and I don't wish to delay the matters progressing in the House.
Call Fletcher Tabato.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to continue